In a quaint village nestled between rolling hills, an unsettling legend loomed over the townsfolk. The whispering forest stretched like a shadow on the edge of town, its towering trees swaying rhythmically, their branches pointed like sinister fingers. Every night, just as the moon cast its eerie light, a haunting melody would weave through the air, calling out the names of unsuspecting villagers. The whispers were so familiar that many claimed they could hear their own names amidst the cacophony of sounds, urging them to step closer to the enigmatic woods. Young Alara was one of the few who dared approach the forest, her curiosity outweighing her fear. She had often heard her name whispered on the wind, but she could never truly decide if it was just her imagination playing tricks on her. That night, as pale moonlight illuminated her bedroom like silvery magic, Alara felt an undeniable pull deep within her heart. With a mix of dread and intrigue swirling in her stomach like swirling leaves in a gust of wind, she opened her window to let in the night air. It flowed into her room, cool and fresh, but it also carried with it the lamenting whispers from the forest, a soft, echoing sound that sent shivers down her spine. Escaping the confines of her cozy home, Alara quietly crept past the sleeping houses. The soft grass cushioned her bare feet, a gentle reminder that the world wasn't as scary as it seemed in the dark. As she made her way toward the forest line, shadows danced around her, twisting and turning like playful spirits. The weight of the darkness wrapped itself tightly around her like a heavy blanket, instilling both fear and wonder as she ventured closer to the edge of the whispering forest. Reluctance momentarily gripped her heart like a tight squeeze, but the whispers, sweet and inviting, grew louder, weaving a melody that wrapped around her like a warm hug. The air felt thick with unspoken promises, promises of magical adventures, hidden secrets waiting to be unveiled, and perhaps the answers to questions she no longer dared to voice in daylight. Questions like who she truly was and what lay beyond the familiar hills of her village. Taking a deep breath, Alara crossed the threshold into the whispering forest. As she stepped in, the gentle rustle of leaves seemed to murmur her name more clearly than ever. Alara, it breathed, a guttural sound that vibrated through her bones. The trees stood tall like ancient sentinels, their gnarled roots twisting from the ground like the fingers of those long lost to time. They swayed with a life of their own, as if welcoming her while also keeping their distance. Shadows danced among the thickets, their shapes deforming and reforming with an unsettling grace, flickering like candlelight in a draught. She could feel their malevolent energy, pulling her deeper into their embrace, inviting her to discover the mysteries waiting within. With her heart pounding wildly, Alara ventured further, her senses heightened as the path became obscured and tangled with thick underbrush. Glimpses of movement caught her eye, and every so often, a low, sinister chuckle would echo in the distance, sending chills down her spine. The forest seemed alive with secrets, hungry for her attention, and Alara could feel its unseen presence observing her, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself. A glance over her shoulder showed nothing but the impenetrable blackness of the woods behind her, making her feel very small and alone in a vast world of shadow. For a fleeting moment, she considered turning back to the comfort of her home, but the whispers called her deeper still, promising things she could only dream of. Suddenly, a clearing opened before her like a hidden treasure chest bursting with secrets. The moon bathed the area in an unholy glow, illuminating the scene with an otherworldly light. Alara gasped as she caught sight of a large stone altar at its center. It was grotesquely adorned with what could only be described as jagged bones and twisted branches, melding into a morbid sculpture that made her heart race with both fear and fascination. The air grew colder, sending icy tendrils wrapping around her, and shadows flickered at the edges of her vision, more like a predator stalking its prey than a mere trick of the light. Chills danced down her spine, and every instinct screamed at her to run away to safety. Yet, the whispers intensified, wrapping around her like a cloying fog, beckoning her to stay where she was. "Join us," the voices whispered, each syllable filled with an ominous charm that tugged at her curiosity. "Eternal life awaits. Be one with the forest." Alara stood at a crossroads, battling between that alluring whisper and the blaring alarm bells ringing in her mind. A faint shimmer caught her eye from the altar, a magical reflection of moonlight shimmering off something glinting on the cold stone that seemed almost inviting. In that moment, she resolved to step closer, willing to discover the truth behind the forest's many promises. With trepidation, she approached the altar, feeling her heart thump louder with each step as if it were keeping time for a dance. As she reached out, her fingers trembling against the cool stone. The ground quaked slightly beneath her. It felt as if the forest was alive and breathing, the trees swaying as if caught in an unsettling wind, and a cacophony of voices erupted around her, each one urging her on with tempting promises. Leave your fears behind. The night is yours. Alara closed her eyes, surrendering to the entrancing melody, the music of the forest weaving around her like a soft blanket. She felt the gnarled roots begin to weave around her ankles as if the forest had claimed her, longing to pull her into its embrace. But then it all stopped. The whispers faded to an eerie hush, wrapped in a silence that felt heavy and thick, like fog settling over a valley. Confused, Alara opened her eyes, and in that instant, the realization struck her like a thunderclap. There were no other souls around. She was utterly alone in the heart of the ancient woods. Panic surged like a tidal wave as her heart raced uncontrollably. She turned to flee, to escape the creeping dread coiling around her like an all-consuming fog, but the forest transformed around her. The branches shifted, snapping into place to form impenetrable walls that tightened their grip. The serene promise of eternal life morphed into a chilling threat. The shadows, once playful, ceased their dance, now looming as lurking figures, ravenous beasts eager to swallow her whole. Alara's mind raced. What have I done? She thought. The air around her grew thick and suffocating, and the forest seemed to chuckle softly, echoing her fear back to her like a mocking ghost. She took a step back, her foot catching on the curling roots that lay deceptively still. Suddenly, the ground beneath her feet seemed to shift, and she stumbled, falling to the cold, hard earth. The altar loomed above her, a dark monolith of despair, its jagged features casting strange shapes in the moonlight. Fear clutched at her heart like a vice. What had she come here for? Answers? Adventure? Or had she merely wandered into a trap? The weight of her decision pressed down upon her like a heavy stone. The whispers returned, softer now, carrying a sense of urgency. Alara, they beckoned, laced with a strange melody that twisted her thoughts. You are chosen. You can be part of something grand. Each word felt like a thorn, pricking her spirit with doubt and confusion. Did she really want to belong to such darkness? What price would she have to pay for the secrets she sought? Desperation surged, and with it, determination. Alara pushed herself up, shaking off the roots that seemed to reach out as if they had a will of their own. No, I won't be a part of this, she shouted, her voice echoing against the aged trees. The shadows shifted, swirling and merging as if deliberating over her boldness. For a moment, silence reigned, the forest paused, holding its breath. Alara's heart pounded as she took a deep breath, the cool air filling her lungs with a sense of clarity. It was time to fight, to reclaim her choices from the forest's grasp. The trees loomed above her, dark and towering, but she realized they were not as terrifying as she had first thought. They were simply trees, old witnesses to countless stories unfolding in their shadows. And she was just one young girl trying to find her way, her own story. Yes, I hear you, she shouted, her voice steadying with newfound strength. But I have my own path to follow. With each word, she felt her courage building, a light swimming through the murky darkness. The shadows flared, flickering as the whispers turned into a dissonant wail, echoing her rejection. Alara turned on her heel, racing back through the clearing. The shadows reached out, trying to pull her back, but she leapt to the side, dodging the grasping branches. She felt the wind rushing past her, filling her lungs, urging her on. The path through the woods was a web of uncertainty, but she pushed forward, determined to find her way back home. As she ran, the forest roared in anger, wanting to keep her under its spell. The whispers weaved into a painful chorus of voices, pleading for her return, but with each step she took, the grip of the forest loosened. The air felt lighter, less oppressive. Finally, she burst back into the open air, emerging at the very edge of the whispering forest. The moonlight bathed her in its silvery glow, washing away the shadows that had clung to her. Behind her, the trees stood tall and menacing, but she wouldn't look back. She refused to be drawn into their dark embrace again. Gasping for breath, Alara took a moment to ground herself in the safety of the night, feeling the cool grass beneath her feet, the gentle breeze carrying the whispers away. She realized then that the forest, with all its allure and danger, would always be there, waiting. But she would not let it claim her. From that day forward, she spoke to the villagers, warning them of the forest's seductive call. She rallied her friends, together sharing stories that transformed fear into courage, creating a bond that would keep them grounded. Together, they forged paths of friendship and hope, shielding one another from the dangers of those haunting whispers. The whispering forest would always loom at the edge of their village, holding its secrets and stories within. But as long as they had each other, Alara knew they could face anything that lay beyond the shadows. She had discovered that courage meant resisting the call of the woods and finding strength in unity. And so, with hearts intertwined, they were ready to meet whatever adventures awaited them, always knowing that the call of the woods would never again beckon them alone. Alara stumbled deeper into the forest, her breath quickening as fear gripped her heart. The shadows cast by the towering twisted trees loomed over her like waiting predators, their grotesque shapes now menacing and cruel. What had once felt like a magical adventure had morphed into a sinister trap woven by unseen forces. The whispering chorus began anew, a chilling symphony that haunted her every step, brushing against her ears like wind tickling the leaves. Turn back now, or surrender to the night, the voices urged in high, soft tones, each word punctuated by sinister giggles that echoed through the gloom. It sounded like a mockery of her terrified state, sending shivers racing down her spine. In her desperate flight, Alara recalled the ominous stories that the villagers had told her by the flickering firelight. Tales of brave souls who had ventured into the whispering forest and never returned. She had once dismissed them as mere folklore, cautionary tales spun by the elders to frighten children into behaving. But as she sprinted through the thick underbrush, her heart heavy with dread, she could no longer deny the truth. The forest was not just a place of trees and shadows, it was a realm of darkness, with a history woven from whispers and sorrow, a malevolence rising from the very soil meant to keep her locked within its clutches. A rustling sound behind her made her skin crawl. With every frantic glance over her shoulder, she felt the claustrophobic darkness closing in, wrapping around her like a tightening noose. The whispers danced in her mind, weaving threads of light into a web meant to ensnare her spirit. "Stay with us," they cooed softly, their voices dripping with sweet lures and hollow promises, "and you will learn the secrets of the forest." Yet, even as they spoke, Alara could feel the serrated edges of their words curling menacingly around her heart, whispering deceitful invitations that twisted around her thoughts like a snake seeking its prey. In a desperate attempt to escape the clutches of the looming shadows, Alara dashed through the underbrush and suddenly stumbled upon a clearing. It was a haunting place, infested with decay and abandonment. The ground was littered with putrid remnants, torn fabric that fluttered like ghosts in the soft, eerie breeze, rusted trinkets mottled with patches of decay, and the remnants of faded photographs, now mere shadows of memories long past. Each item whispered stories of faded lives, tales of those who had once ventured into the whispering forest before her. As she gathered her breath amidst the debris, her heart sank with horror. These relics were emblems of lost hopes and forgotten dreams. The echoes of laughter now morphed into blood-curdling reminders of fates intertwined with treachery that awaited her should she dare to linger. The wind howled, carrying the mournful cries of lost souls. For the first time, the whispers no longer sounded inviting, they felt darker, more threatening. "You can't leave, you are one of us now," they hissed, their words slithering through the air with a possessive greed. An unsettling revelation wrapped around her like a serpent tightening its grip. Suddenly, Alara felt the ground shift beneath her as if the very essence of the forest was alive, pulsing with a dark hunger for something, perhaps her very essence. Instinct begged her to run, to keep moving away from the flickering shadows, but curiosity sparked anew within her. Ahead, she noticed a path that hadn't been there before, an overgrown trail leading deeper into the woods, tantalizingly inviting even as it whispered danger. What lay ahead? Was it a glimmer of hope or a spiral into despair? Every fiber of her being urged her to turn back and flee into the comforting arms of daylight, but a morbid fascination tugged at her heart. Perhaps the answers she sought were hidden somewhere deep within the forest's heart. With renewed determination washing over her, Alara pressed on, each step sinking her deeper into the creature's maw. The shadows loomed larger and more sinister, twisting into forms that seemed to watch her with bloodlust intent, their eyes sparkling with a twisted form of hunger. Her heart raced as she entered a grove that felt darker and more haunting than anything she had encountered so far. The very air felt thick with sorrow, stinging her lungs with its dampness. The trees here were gnarled and grotesque, resembling twisted souls frozen in pain, their branches reaching out as though they were crying for rescue that would never come. It was as if the forest itself mourned for the souls it had devoured. As she ventured deeper into the grove, a figure shifted in the shadows, a malformed silhouette, huddled and twisted, its hollow eye sockets swallowed in darkness. The figure emitted a guttural laugh, a sound that scraped against her heart like fingernails on chalkboard, sending chills racing down Alara's back. "You'll see," it rasped, voice cracking like branches underfoot. "The beauty of eternal life. Join the chorus. Let go." The figure's words oozed with sorrow, echoing in a way that felt eerily familiar, stirring dark memories she had tried to forget. In that eerie moment, she recognized the engraved faces on the trees around her, lives who had vanished into the forest's embrace. Their eyes were haunting, filled with a grim longing that sent a wave of dread crashing over her. They had all listened to the whispers, lured by promises that twisted their very beings into nothing more than shadows and echoes of their former selves. Before she could react, branches suddenly sprang forth like iron shackles, gripping her arms and pulling her toward the black latticework of darkness. A weight of despair settled heavy upon her shoulders. She felt small and insignificant, just another yearning spirit caught in the forest's grip, echoing the songs of the damned. "Let go," the figure urged, so close now that Alara could see the twisted smile etched across its face. She realized that its laughter was not full of joy, it was tinged with loss, a haunting reminder of everything she could become. "We are waiting for you to join us. The forest is alive, it knows your name." Panic surged within her. "No." She shook her head and pulled against the branches, desperate to find strength in her limbs. "I don't want to be a part of this," she shouted, her voice fractured and trembling as it ricocheted through the grove. "I want to leave." Yet the whispers only grew louder, drowning out her cries as they enveloped her in a cacophony of desperation. "In the silence, you will find peace," the voices chimed, a chorus layered with sweet promises but dulled with echoes of despair. "You will never be alone. Join us." Alara's heart raced as she felt the pupating shadows tightening their grip, suffocating her with dread. "You're wrong," she cried out, summoning every ounce of courage left within her. "I will find my way home." Fueled by sheer determination, she pushed against the branches, straining to keep her trapped, reaching deep within her, seeking a flicker of bravery that had been hidden away amid the whispers of the forest. With a desperate shout, she broke free from their grasp. Stumbling backwards, she felt the cold wind as it rushed past her, a brief escape that left her breathless as her heart pounded a frantic rhythm against her chest. She turned and ran, a wild dash fueled by fear and hope, not looking back to see if the shadows followed. She sprinted through the grove, dodging the grotesque trees that seemed to reach out for her with twigs like skeletal fingers clawing at her. Alara burst through the end of the grove, her legs almost giving out as she spilled out onto a wider path. For a moment, she was met with quiet, an eerie stillness that felt surreal after the chaos of the grove. The noises of the forest faded into the background, replaced by the distant chirp of crickets and the gentle rustling of leaves. But even as she caught her breath, tired and trembling, the whispers had not vanished completely. They lingered like shadows lurking just at the edge of her senses, reminding her that she was not free yet. They murmured assurances, tantalizing and thin, waiting for another moment of weakness. "It's not too late," they whispered softly. "The forest still has secrets to share. Come closer." Alara shook her head, her hair whipping across her face, determined to drown out their voices. She had come too close to losing herself to the darkness, and she would not let it take her, even if it was a part of her that longed for companionship, to be understood. She took a deep breath. The air was fresher here, and she could almost taste the freedom that lay ahead. With each determined step, she ventured forward, taking the path that seemed to lead her away from the ominous laughter echoing behind her. Alara knew she wasn't free yet, but she remembered the way hope had flickered in her chest, a cook fire against the blackness. Whatever secrets the forest tried to bestow upon her would not be hers this night. She would not be silenced or consumed. She would reclaim her voice and forge her path. Alara would race through the forests and break free from the haunting echoes of those who had come before, driven by the heartbeat of adventure and the promise of returning home. As she stumbled onto the path, the trees seemed to part before her, opening up a way toward the light. A renewed sense of purpose washed over her, a slow but steady stream of courage igniting within her heart. She would keep running. She would not let the whispers ensnare her in their haunting melody. And with that thought, she pressed on, leaving the echoes behind her, carrying the warmth of hope as her guide through the whispering forest. Time ceased to exist in the suffocating embrace of the whispering forest. Alara found herself lost within its depths, surrounded by tangled branches and thick foliage that blocked out even the faintest glimmer of sunlight. What had once been exciting whispers now turned into a huge noise, a clamor of tortured souls wrapped in despair. The air grew dense, thick with a putrid scent that clawed at her throat, making it difficult to breathe. It was as if the forest was suffocating her, pulling her deeper into its dark heart. Alara fought against the forest's brutal grip, pushing against the damp earth and reaching for anything solid. She understood now. This was not merely a realm of shadows but a vicious custodian preying on hopes and dreams. The excitement she had felt upon entering the forest was long gone, replaced by fear and uncertainty. It felt as if she had stumbled into a trap, one carefully laid by something ancient and hungry. As daylight receded, darkness crawled over the ground like a slow tide, and the forest transformed into a nightmare. Twisted live oaks loomed above her, their jagged trunks and gnarled branches twisting into grotesque shapes. The oak trees seemed to moan and groan in unison, creating an eerie melody with the gentle rustle of leaves. Alara's heart raced, echoing loudly in her chest. Where was the beauty and promise she had come to find? Instead of vibrant secrets, she found herself ensnared in a living nightmare. She had wished to uncover the truths of the forest, but the truth was bitter. A malevolent entity hungered for the lost. The whispers morphed into mockery, growing louder as Alara struggled against the grip of malevolent roots that tightened around her legs. The roots felt like cold fingers wrapping around her, squeezing tighter. "You wanted to know, didn't you?" They chorused in voices that dripped with delight. "You wanted to be with us forever." Their laughter twisted through the air, sharp and taunting. It was no revelation, it was a terrible truth. The forest was a predator, and she was the prey. The trees seemed to snicker at her plight while the shadows danced around her in a wild frenzy. Alara's thoughts spiraled out of control. She felt trapped and afraid, and her heart raced faster. The whispers wrapped around her like a thick fog, clouding her mind. The hunger of the forest gnawed at her, tearing at her sanity, flooding her thoughts with doubt and confusion. Why had she come here? What had she hoped to find? Panic filled her chest as she scrambled to regain control, but the forest's grip only tightened. In her desperate struggle against the turns of roots and dark shadows, she heard the echoes of others. Voices from long ago, trapped in an echo chamber of despair. "Join us," they begged her, their eerie sounds blending with the haunting melodies of the forest. Each voice told a tragic story, a story of lost dreams and shattered lives, woven together like a tapestry of suffering. Alara felt a chill run down her spine, and her skin prickled. They were once just like her, curious souls lured into the darkness until they, too, became shadows. "Help us," another voice cried. Alara looked around, her breath caught in her throat as she recognized their faces in the shifting shadows, faint images of people who had been here before, their eyes pools of despair. They reached out to her, silent screams etched on their lips, pleading for escape even as they seemed resigned to their fate. It was what she feared the most, losing herself to the forest and becoming one of its lost voices. "Don't give in," she screamed, her voice barely rising above the chaos of whispers suffusing the air. "Fight it, we can still escape." But the forest laughed, rich and sinister, delighting in her cries for help, wrapping her tighter in its clutches. A grotesque wind howled through the woods, and the laughter warped, echoing from all sides. It mingled with the voices of the lost, those who had allowed the darkness to claim their souls. Despair hung in the air like a heavy cloud, and Alara could feel hope slipping through her fingers like grains of sand. The more she struggled to hold on, the more she felt herself fading, a thread unraveled in a tapestry of despair. The roots tugged at her, inch by inch pulling her deeper into their grasp. She understood now, it was not peace this forest sought, but rather the feeding of an insatiable hunger that knew no bounds. Tears streamed down her cheeks as Alara's heart raced. She realized she had become part of their tragedy, another voice lost in the cacophony of the forest's whispers. The trees shifted, closing in until she could hear their breath, heavy with the stench of decay. "Stay with us forever, Alara," They beckoned, their voices seductive, warm and soft as if wrapping her in a tender embrace. Leave your memories behind. Join our chorus. We're eternal. In that moment, Alara felt it. She felt the lure of forgetting her past, of abandoning everything she had ever known. It was tempting, so very tempting. What was freedom anyway, but a painful memory? The whispers embraced her, filling her mind with obscured visions. A life without fear, free from pain, an endless night filled with soothing darkness. She imagined a world without responsibilities, where every worry could vanish with a single breath. It all seemed so easy. Her resolve faltered as the forest played its wicked game with her thoughts. The intoxicating whispers flooded her mind, enticing her with happiness and comfort. The shadows moved closer, beckoning her with promises of safety and serenity. She felt her heart slow, the tension easing as the last vestige of her spirit began to slip away. Wouldn't it be nice to just let go? Then, as her will began to crumble, a flicker of light fought through the overwhelming tide. Alara remembered her home, the laughter of her friends, and the warmth of her family. Memories flooded back in quick waves, bright and vivid against the darkness that surged up around her. She thought of the sun speckling the ground with light, of dancing in meadows filled with flowers and butterflies fluttering around her. The love that had shaped her life was not something she could leave behind. It anchored her to who she was. No, she screamed, her voice cutting through the veil of despair like a sword. Alara drew on every ounce of strength and willpower she had left. I won't be one of you. The laughter of the forest twisted, turning into hisses and shrieks of anger. The grotesque wind whipped around her like angry spirits, but she stayed firm in her resolve. With new determination, Alara pulled at the dark roots that held her captive. She kicked and tugged, her heart pounding in her ears. The noise swirled around her, lost souls lamenting their choices, the trees complaining of her defiance. But she pressed onward, fueled by the memories that lit up her mind. Each thought of home, of happiness, sharpened her resolve. She was not ready to become another echo in this haunted place. The roots slackened just a bit, responding to her struggle. Alara used that moment to wriggle her legs free and push herself up from the ground. She scrambled away, pulling herself through the thick underbrush while dodging snapping branches and curling vines. She could hear the whispers turning into howls behind her, the creatures of the forest enraged by her flight. Every step she took was heavy, but each footfall drove her closer to liberation. Alara looked back once, and what she saw made her skin crawl. The forest loomed large, angry and dark, its angry tendrils reaching for her. But the shape of the trees began to morph, twisting into distorted faces filled with rage, despair and hunger, their mouths opening wide in silent screams. The echoes of those lost souls intertwined with the dread she felt, urging her onward. Her chest tightened with fear, but she knew she could not stop. With newfound vigor, Alara finally broke free from the choking grip of the forest. She dashed through the undergrowth, feeling the cool air against her skin. The hushed whispers faded into the distance as she raced through the forest, adrenaline surging through her veins. Each step brought her closer to the edge of the whispering forest, to the light inching its way through the trees. She could feel the warm sun on her face, urging her to move faster, to escape the nightmare that sought to ensnare her heart and soul. Finally, she cleared the last thicket and tumbled into a sun-drenched meadow, gasping for breath. The colors of the meadow were vibrant and alive. Sunflowers swayed gently in the breeze, and a chorus of birds filled the air with joyful songs. Alara fell to the soft grass, finally safe. The air felt clean and fresh again, and the laughter of children playing nearby filled her heart with warmth. She had escaped the clutches of the malevolent forest. Alara lay there for a moment, remembering the faces of those trapped in the forest, those who had walked the same path as her, seeking something they could not find. With a heavy heart, she promised to carry their stories with her. She understood that the darkness was real, but so was the light. Alara rose to her feet, determined to learn from her experience. The whispering forest had shown her the power of hope and the importance of cherishing her memories. The forest had revealed its ugly truth, but it could not take away her spirit. She would share her story and ensure that she and the others would not be forgotten. With newfound strength, Alara turned back toward the world, ready for the next adventure life had to offer. The forest surrounding Alara felt suffocating, thick and heavy like a blanket made of shadows. Each breath she took seemed to push against her chest, making her feel smaller and more lost. The tall trees, with their twisted branches, loomed over her like giants, whispering secrets that were not meant for her ears. Alara felt like a tiny leaf adrift on a dark river, caught in the currents of despair that swept through the empty spaces around her. She had come seeking adventure, but instead, she found herself wrapped in chains of sorrow. "Join us, Alara," the haunting voices sighed. They were not friendly voices, they felt old and empty. Once they might have belonged to carefree beings who frolicked in the sunlight, but now they had become echoes of sadness. Alara shivered as she felt their call reach into her heart. She realized she was not just a seeker anymore, she had become trapped, a vessel carrying their burdens within her. The darkness pressed in around her, thick like fog on a chilly morning, filling her lungs with a sense of dread and gloom. Memories of her past danced in her mind like flickering candle flames, whispering tales of joy that now seemed so far away. Images of sunlight spilling through the leaves, laughter shared with friends, and the warmth of home flickered before her eyes, but they were fading, dimming under the weight of the forest. As she stood there, those precious memories felt as if they were being snatched away, eaten by the shadows. Alara felt something wrap around her heart, squeezing it tightly, as though the forest itself was trying to pull her down into its dark depths. "You can shed your burdens, you know," the voices beckoned softly. "Leave your past behind. Here, you will be free, a part of our family." The words were wrapped in a sweet temptation, trying to lure her deeper into the darkness. It would be so easy to let go, to fade away and become one with the shadows. No more pain, no more loneliness, it seemed like a dream come true. But deep inside her, a tiny flicker of hope still clung on, fighting against the tide of despair. The whispers grew louder, the shadows danced closer, wrapping around her like a heavy cloak. Alara felt her resolve weakening as the empty promises echoed in her mind. Still, somewhere within her, a small voice screamed for survival. "I won't be lost," she declared, her heart pounding in her chest like a drum. In that moment, her words shattered the stillness of the forest. They rang out, a strong defiance against the suffocating silence that wanted to pull her into its embrace. But the forest did not take her defiance lightly. The shadows shrieked, a chorus of anger and confusion. No. They howled, their monstrous voices swirling around her like a storm of fury. "You belong to us. You cannot escape." The trees seemed to tremble, their twisted roots seeking to reclaim her, stretching out like fingers trying to drag her back into the darkness. Fueled by sheer determination, Alara wrenched her legs free from the grasp of the roots. She stumbled backwards, her heart racing as she tore through the underbrush, her breath coming in sharp gasps. The path ahead, once familiar, twisted and turned, as though the forest itself was shifting and changing, leading her deeper into confusion. Each step filled her with both fear and a wild sense of freedom. She was fighting back against the darkness. "Leave this place, Alara." A solitary voice sliced through the noise, a whisper that stood out against the chaotic clamor. It was soft yet insistent, encouraging her to push forward. She stumbled, branches reaching out to her like grasping hands, wanting to pull her back into the shadows that threatened to engulf her. But the memory of sunlight pierced through the weight of despair, reminding her that there was still warmth in the world. Alara pressed on, dodging twisted branches and dense undergrowth, her heart thundering in her chest. She could do this. The ugly laughter that had echoed before faded into a mere ghostly whisper, and for a moment, she felt she could break free. But just as she thought she had escaped, the darkness reached out for her again. With a final burst of strength, she emerged from the thick, clinging shadows into a clearing she thought she had left behind. To her horror, the stone altar stood eerily still among the woodland, casting deep shadows that swayed in the dim light. Her heart sank as the laughter returned, reverberating around her, filling the air like a wicked spell she couldn't shake off. It was a terrible reminder that she had not found her escape. She was back where she started, a prisoner of the forest. In that dreadful moment, Alara knew, with a sinking feeling deep in her stomach, that this was her last chance. The forest had played a cruel trick on her, luring her in with fleeting glimpses of hope, only to trap her in despair. She was bound to this place, forever destined to join the chorus of the lost souls whose tales echoed through the trees. "Join us," the damned voices whispered again, their tones enticing yet chilling, promising her eternity at the cost of her spirit. With every ounce of her being, Alara felt the darkness wrapping around her, squeezing like the grip of a serpent. The roots tightened their hold once more, pulling her back, their wickedness overpowering her fragile light. Shadows settled heavily around her, and she felt herself begin to fade. The laughter of the forest echoed, a twisted melody that promised to erase her existence. But there, inside her chest, that tiny flicker of hope blazed defiantly. It pulsed stronger with every heartbeat, calling her to fight back. "No," Alara shouted, her voice strong and clear, breaking through the layers of darkness. "You will not take me." With that declaration, the shadows recoiled slightly, feeling the brilliance of her resolve. For she was still Alara, a girl filled with dreams and memories, not a mere echo to be swallowed by the forest. With renewed strength, she dug her feet into the ground, drawing energy from the very earth beneath her. She focused on the warmth of the sun, the laughter she remembered, and all the love she had felt in her life. With each breath she took, she pushed against the shadows, using the power of her hope to create a shield around her heart. "I choose to remember," she declared fiercely. "I will not be part of your darkness." The echoes of the forest screamed in protest as her words sliced through their chaos. Shadows twisted and writhed, their grasp faltering. The roots retreated momentarily, surprised by the surge of light that Alara summoned. The clearing began to shimmer, the oppressive air lifting as brightness fought back against the encroaching darkness. "Leave this place and never return," the single voice cried out again, merging with Alara's growing strength. The shadows began to recede, and she realized she was not alone. With every breath, the forest could feel the fire in her spirit rising, pushing the darkness back. Light began to spill into the clearing, illuminating the stone altar, breaking the twisted hold it had over her. "This is not your home," Alara called out one last time, her voice soaring with determination. She could feel the warm reds and yellows of sunlight pressing against the edges of the woods. In that moment, it became clear to her that she could reclaim her life. The forest, once a comfort, had become a prison, and she would not allow herself to be snatched away. With every ounce of fight left in her, she turned and ran. She raced back the way she had come, her heart racing, pushing through the underbrush with a newfound sense of purpose. She felt lighter with each step, the air brightening around her. The whispers faded, their soft lullabies growing fainter as she burst out of the cover of trees. As she finally reached the edge of the forest, sunlight drenched her surroundings, wrapping her in warm golden rays. The grass swayed in a gentle breeze, and the open sky felt like freedom wrapping around her like the safest hug in the world. She had escaped. With newfound vigor, she turned back to look at the dark embrace of the whispering forest. Somehow, she knew it would always be there, waiting for others to wander into its grasp. She sighed with relief, her lungs filled with the sweet, fresh air. The sun was shining down, and she could finally breathe without feeling the weight of despair pressing against her chest. Alara took one last look at the forest, a place that had both frightened her and taught her the value of her inner strength. No longer would she let darkness take hold of her heart. "Thank you for the lesson," she whispered gently, knowing that the memories of the forest would always ripple through her mind as a reminder of resilience. The past could not bind her, she was free. And in that luminous moment, surrounded by the beauty of the open field and the promise of new adventures, Alara took a deep breath and stepped forward into life, leaving the chains of the forest behind. The creatures of the woods, the whispers of the lost souls faded into the distance, powerless against her newfound light. Alara was determined to never forget the way back to hope.